Next, we have Lee, who works at AfricaCheck. AfricaCheck have several different offices in Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, and South Africa. And Lee is the editor in South Africa.
Hello, everyone. In Africa, we use a lot of color, so don't wonder why my presentation is in orange, but also orange and black are our organizational colors, so I have to confirm. So my presentation is titled Fact-Checking from the Front Lines, Tales from South Africa and indeed Africa. We are present in 3 other African countries in addition to South Africa. We were established in Johannesburg in 2012. We had only 2 staff at the time. We may never grow to be as big as Google or Facebook right now, but we're now at 30, and we are starting to ask ourselves, who did you say you are again? So I think that's good growth. We are non-partisan and independent, and we are signatories to the IFCN Code of Principles, and also we are third-party fact-checker on Facebook, one of about 30 such organizations. So these are some of our partners. I saw Nishant bring us up during his presentation from Luminate, so I'm happy to return the favor. Luminate is one of our supporters or partners. Interestingly, the African environment is different, and when I say Africa, I'm essentially referring to the 4 countries we are present in, so have an asterisk when I talk of Africa, but the main types of misinformation in our experience in those countries has been one, videos and images used in false context and interestingly false health cures. I'll tell you a bit why that is so. In terms of false context videos, this is one of actually our most trafficked debunk this year. It's about the issue of anti-foreigner sentiment in South Africa. It's, as you might know, quite something you might relate to if you're from the land of Boris Johnson or Donald Trump, but is also quite prevalent in South Africa. And these were images that were shared, said to have been of such violence that occurred in the last 2 or 3 months. But essentially, as you can see, there's a small picture of a man burning there. This was from 2008, similar violence. The men there lying on the ground were South African citizens. They were not foreign migrants, as it was reported. They were being targeted, and also the last is a video of people jumping from a burning building in India, but it was said to be in South Africa. So why was this viral? You might say, neo fact checkers like ourselves might say this is because the images evoked emotional responses, and the debunk format was something that is effective, it warns fast, it gets in the facts early, but I think it's important to understand that in many African societies, information gathering leverages on group relationships. So societies in Africa are still very much close-knit and are less individualistic than in many other societies. So there's an inherent acceptance that any information that is shared is trustworthy and acceptable. In terms of false health cures, you might explain this is something that tends to be quite viral, hundreds of thousands of shares in recent years. Has been restricted to Facebook mainly, but, and you might say it's viral because, again, it's something that is speaking to how people are looking for health information these days, that people tend to go online, but it is important to realize it has been viral in Africa because quality healthcare in many African countries is still out of reach, and many families, middle-class families, diagnosis of cancer is a ticket to poverty because it's so expensive to treat cancer. Interestingly, also, popular misinformation might also be truth. We are not yet post-truth in Africa. The work we do that sheds light on topics that are relatable, whether it's on crime trends, farm murders, and unemployment tend to be quite popular. So there's hope there for anyone who might be thinking post-truth is what we have to deal with. So what's different about the 4 countries we deal with? One is that relationships come before purpose. So this is something we need to think about when we are coming up with tools, solutions to countering misinformation. In the global north tends to be opposite. You've got a product, you deploy it, and then see how it relates to your relationships. The result is then you have a tool or product that is great in one space, but then you have to work backwards to retrofit it towards African and global south audiences. Also important that people in Africa get their information differently than in other societies. Essentially, information percolates into the ground first and then into individuals. So essentially, as opposed to other societies where you have the individual disseminating information to the society. In Africa First, you probably might have a chief calling what we call barazas, communal meetings. You discuss the issue that is affecting that society, and then you agree that we have agreed that this is what we are going to do. So you need to think of how information is taken up in societies in Africa if you are going to craft solutions to countering misinformation. And also, worldviews tend to lean towards the communal rather than the ideological. So again, this might be something we need to think as we come up with automated solutions or venture into AI. So what should the horizon look like? One, let's come up with tools that emphasize relationships. One of our most well-received approaches has been what we call the Appcast. It's a voice note produced professionally that banks crowdsourced information on WhatsApp. So this has been popular because it speaks to social consensus information, essentially that there's an innate belief that others believe a certain piece of information and that their intentions for sharing this information are idealistic or they are pure. And also, it also leverages on the peer-to-peer sharing of group memberships. We've noticed in Africa, memberships to group really is important. We also need to think about indigenizing fact-checking solutions. For example, our agreement with Facebook to fact-check in 11 other African languages generated a lot of interest. And we were excited about it ourselves because it breaks out accurate information out of the urban ivory towers to where it is much needed and much concentrated on the ground. One of the biggest anguish I have had in my work was I was doing some training on fact-checking tools in Bogota, in Colombia a few weeks back, and then this lady comes up to me and she tells me she works with communities in eastern Colombia where she said conflict is still prevalent, and she wanted to understand how she could get these tools and use them in her community, you know, among members of her community. And these are communities, she said, that don't have as good access to the internet or may not speak English or Spanish for that case. And I'm still, it's still a stuff of nightmares for me that I didn't have an accurate solution for how to deploy this kind of tools that we come up with to the communities that really need this kind of information. And also more research is needed into how societal differences, as I've mentioned, such as culture, affect responses to misinformation. What I've seen in terms of research is we have a template that is more or less north-centered, global north, and then we try to fit it into the solutions that, into our societies, and it would be much better if this information, this research about misinformation about Africa was coming from Africa itself as opposed to having a template then that you're trying to fit. One more about how we take engagement, misinformation in Africa. This has been quite viral on our site. It was about 3 men who were hanged for the rape and murder of a boy. Maybe its shock value was something that resonated to people, but interestingly, 80% of our audience for this fact check was American. So my assessment was because maybe there was a question about why they were not afforded due process, but for many African readers, it didn't raise too much eyebrows because communal punishment was long a feature in many African societies. So that is just an example. So as a wrap up, does one size fit all? We don't think so. I have not described medieval society. What I'm simply saying is that you've got your shoe. Why force me to wear that shoe? Maybe I prefer sandals. So essentially, let's collaborate and come up with solutions that speak to all the societies that we are present in. And that is, oh, this guy works. He never works in my presentation. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Questions later.